All right. When we're saying planting here today, we're talking about cover crop planting. I know everybody has a different kind of planting on their minds at this point in the season. Um, but today we're just talking about getting cover crop seed in the ground. So there's a lot of decisions that have to happen before we get to the point of putting cover crop seed in the ground. And so now is not a bad time to be thinking about what might be going in this season into your cash crop rotation. Um, so, um, One resource that we use that's available through Midwest Cover Crop Council is a cover crop decision tool. There's a whole lot of information that goes into that cover crop decision tool that can kind of help you match um, your goals to what cover crop species you have available. Today, I'll be focusing on kind of cover crop seeding timing and how that matches up with goals and how that matches up with your operation, and just kind of covering the information that is highlighted in the cover crop planting website. So a lot of research has gone into all of these tips, a lot of farmer experience, a lot of research experience. At Midwest Cover Crop Council, they try to make sure that all the resources are research-based and, set realistic goals for farmers in the Midwest. So, there's a lot of different times to seed cover crops. And like I said, there's a lot of decisions that we have to go through. One timing that is especially used in the northern part of the Midwest is going to be frost seeding. Um, you know, Frost seeding is a very particular kind of window where you're looking for taking advantage of the freeze-thaw cycle. What happens when soils are kind of frozen and then they thaw and then they freeze up again is seed that's on the surface or broadcast on the surface has the opportunity to kind of get worked in um, without having to do any kind of incorporation. So when we think about all of these different methods of seeding cover crops, broadcast tends to be the quickest. Um, and There's pros and cons to each of the seeding methods. Broadcast being it's quick is a pro. A con is that, you lose some germination, you lose some stand because that seed is on the surface. So taking advantage of the freeze-thaw cycle to help incorporate the seed without any kind of mechanical incorporation is really nice. Also, it's at a point in the season, we're talking around March here in Michigan, when you can drive over frozen soils without impacting, soil structure, causing compaction, those kinds of things. There's only a few species that are recommended to be frost seeded. It works very well with legumes, specifically clovers. Here we do a lot of red clover, frost seeded. There are some grasses that you can also frost seed. But for the most part, we're talking clover. We can go to the next slide. Oh, so sorry, this picture here, go back. Thank you. This picture kind of highlights what the soil should look like. We kind of have that honeycomb structure, and that's kind of what we're looking for. That's showing the seed kind of sitting on the top right after being frost seeded. We would expect some of those seeds to be worked in as we go through the frost or freeze thaw cycle. Now we can go to the next one. Here is a picture of clover frost seeded into wheat. So it would have been frost seeded into standing wheat around March. The picture on the left is going to be right before harvest. So you can see there's just a little bit of clover that's established. It turns out that that time of establishment is kind of what you need to get a good clover stand. So having from March into October, because once that wheat's taken off and the sun can reach the soil, um, sorry, not October. This picture was taken in July. So March to July, just having that little bit of growth. When you take that weed off, the picture on the right is then taken in October. So the clover is able to really take off. You get a really nice stand. And it turns out with legumes, if you're trying to fix nitrogen, having that much biomass is everything, right? That's when you can actually grow nitrogen in this case. And in a lot of places in the Midwest, really, that's kind of the only way to be able to get a nitrogen credit. So we've got some information about frost seeding in the website. Again, trying to focus on research-based recommendations, on-farm um, tested recommendations. We can go next. Next, timing would be early interseeding. So when I say interseeding, I mean seeded into a standing crop. We've got kind of two windows that we think about when we talk about interseeding. One would be early. So in the case of corn, we're talking V3 to V6, V7, kind of when you can drive over the crop really. Um, it's generally not recommended in soybeans, but pretty popular in corn. And there's information about where those recommendations come from on the website. But very broadly, um, there's a lot of work being done. You see this picture here is in Wisconsin. There's work being done in Michigan as well. This interseeding is especially popular in the northern part of the Midwest, again, because trying to find windows that aren't just post-harvest. Um, let's see what else. There's also specific recommendations of what species might be better interseeded because they have to go through different conditions than, say, a post-harvest seeding timing, specifically shade, and also tend to experience more drought. We're thinking if we're seeding V3 to V7, talking like around June, um, generally we might see some kind of drought conditions between June and harvest. So we have specific recommendations on the website based on research from Wisconsin, from other places. Another important consideration is herbicide carryover when you're starting to seed cover crops earlier in the season. You want to make sure that your cash crop herbicide program isn't impacting the development of your cover crop. So if you're thinking about starting to interseed, maybe you are, working on some kind of interseeder rig like Dan Smith took a picture of here in Wisconsin, where you're drilling in between rows. You don't want to go through all that work and then realize that, you had some kind of residual herbicide that isn't allowing your cover crop to germinate. So there's some really nice resources, right? We've had plenty of researchers, farmers make that mistake before, and we've learned a lot up to this point. And so you can check some of those resources out on the website as far as which species do well in interseeding, which species are more sensitive to typical cash crop herbicide programs. We can go to the next slide. So we also have a later interseeding window. Now this later interseeding window might be a little bit more attractive if if that early window, you're too busy side dressing, spraying, whatever, you don't want to change your herbicide program and are worried about carryover. This late interseeding window, so meaning kind of when the corn's just about turning or when your soybeans are just about to drop their leaves, that would be the late interseeding window. We're talking more September, like early September. uh, overseeding over the crop. Now, you don't have as many ground rig options. There are some highboy interseeders or like high clearance ground rigs that have been adapted to spread cover crops over, say, beans. But a lot of times we're thinking like airplanes, drones, something that can fly over the crop. Um, while you still should check to make sure none of your residual herbicides are going to impact cover crop growth, um, you might have maybe some more options for what you can seed and what kind of herbicides you can use in your cash crop if you choose this late interseeding option. Still worried a little bit about shade tolerance because the cover crops are going to be establishing under a standing crop. However, they have to live, I guess, less of their life under the crop. Um, there's big concerns about timing with rain. You want to make sure that you're going to catch some kind of rain. That doesn't always happen depending on where you're at. Being able to irrigate in can help, but timing just ahead of rain, research has shown, is really important for good establishment in this case. We can go to the next one. Okay, seeding during harvest is another option. Um, this requires some really specialized equipment, but it is nice because it's kind of a one-pass system. It does allow seed to be distributed under crop residue. So if you're doing post-harvest over or broadcast seeding, that seed's going to be on top of crop residue, and depending on the amount of crop residue you have or the distribution of your crop residue, could be a problem for germination. Um, this can sometimes slow harvest, and so there's specific operation or sizes of operations that this might work for better. I think that's all I got for that. And then finally, we've got post-harvest seeding, which of course is going to be your most common. You can use a variety of planting methods, right? With interseeding, we don't have any kind of drill options, right? Unless unless you've got the specialized equipment that we showed the picture of. With post-harvest seeding, you can drill, you can broadcast and then incorporate. We've got a lot of different options. So, and I guess less specialized equipment is required. Um, the main problem here, especially here in the Midwest, is going to be that there may be a limited window between harvest and when any kind of killing frost might happen. So that limits the species that are going to really be successful and really give you, your bang for your buck. And so while this works for a lot of people, because post-harvest seeding is the most popular, I would guess that's why cereal rye is the most popular as well, because cereal rye is one of the few species that are going to really consistently, successfully establish and overwinter in a post-harvest seeding situation. There's lots of pros and cons for those planting methods that you're using post-harvest, and we go over some of those on the website. But really, we're talking if you drill, you're going to get quicker establishment and maybe more consistent overwintering. Drilling is slower at a time when you're probably still harvesting and still, you've got multiple other operations that are going on. Maybe getting your cover crop isn't your main priority. And so broadcast can be pretty popular. Broadcast seeding in a post-harvest situation does slow establishment. You may see more spotty germination. especially because if it's broadcast without incorporation and you've got a lot of seed sitting on top of residue, um, that's why if you go to if you look at kind of seeding rate recommendations, you might see a large range and you hopefully see different, whether it's in your seed catalog or you're looking at the Midwest Cover Crop Council field guide, you're going to see different seeding rate recommendations for drilled versus broadcast. So broadcast is always going to be higher, especially broadcast without incorporation. Those seeding rates are always going to be higher because of that loss of germination and that slower establishment when you're seeding right on top of residue or you're just leaving seed on top of the soil. And I think that covers timing, Ethan. Got anything? Ethan's gonna get more into the specifics on the equipment, so I kind of brushed over a lot of that, but
Yeah,
will help us out.
we'll go into equipment here of equipment as it applies to just planting of cover crops. For more information on equipment for planting, we'll go into a little more detail and equipment for termination and other operations relating to cover crops. Be sure to tune in to tomorrow's webinar at the same time on the same link. So let's talk about some equipment for broadcast without incorporation. So like Madeline said, we can really use broadcast at any timing, whether it's that frost seeding, early or late interseeding, or even post-harvest. We can do a broadcast pass to seed cover crops. And there's a wide variety of broadcast equipment out there, from fertilizer spreaders to airplanes to drones. Anything that's just spreading that seed on the surface is going to be considered broadcast without incorporation. So, like I said, we have that pre or post harvest window, so a really wide window, because we can always spread that seed on top of the soil. But the main concern here with that spreading of the seed on top of the soil surface is that we need adequate moisture to get that seed to establish, and work that seed into the soil. So different seeds are going to need different moisture requirements. So it's good to look at plants for this that don't require a deep seeding depth. Will have a better reliability of stand establishment for broadcast seeding. Especially those small seeded species tend to perform better. They also tend to broadcast more evenly out of some of these applications than some of the larger seeded species. Along with this, we want to make sure that our equipment's set up for the spread pattern of whatever species we've chosen, and then increasing that seeding rate from, say, our drilled rate 20 to 50%, since some of that seed is not going to germinate as quickly on that seed surface as it would if we were drilling or planting that into the soil. So one way we can improve seed to soil contact of our cover crop seed, if we're going to broadcast that cover crop seed, is to incorporate the cover crop seed after it's been broadcast. So this could be done with 2 passes or 1. So we could come in and you could broadcast your seed and then go over it with a tillage pass shortly after. Or we can put a broadcast seeder onto an existing piece of tillage equipment, and try and do that in 1 pass. So, of course, if we're going to be doing any tillage, this becomes a post-harvest cover crop application. But it is more reliable and we can see a better stand establishment with some incorporation than broadcast alone. But a lot of tillage operations can go deeper than many of these cover crop species. It should be seeded, so be sure to check the species you're seeded on our cover crop selector tool or in the cover crop field guide, what depth that seed should be planted, and then set your incorporation equipment accordingly to get that seed placed at the correct depth. So we can see in the picture here where this air seeder's been mounted to this tillage tool. It looks like those hoses are run towards the back of that tool, so it's probably just being incorporated with that last finishing tool pass and not with these discs up front because we might be too deep with some of those deeper passes that some of these tools do. And just like when we're broadcasting, we need to check those spread patterns to make sure that the stand is even. We don't want, thick parts of that stand and thin parts come springtime when we're trying to terminate or plant into those cover crops. We don't need to increase the seeding rate, say as much as if we were just going to broadcast and leave it on the surface. But this still isn't as reliable as drilling a cover crop. So we need to increase that 10 to 20% from that drilled rate. Coming up on drilling, one of the more reliable post-harvest planting methods of cover crops. Drills are designed to plant small seeded crops, which most of our cover crops are, especially the cereal grains like cereal rye. So they're a clear option to get a good stand of cover crops out there. Many drills now are set up to no-till, so we can minimize soil disturbance also while we're seeding our cover crops. We can follow those soil health principles of minimizing disturbance, putting in a living root, and having living cover all in one pass there. We need to make sure we take the time to set up drills though for optimum seed depth and spacing as well. So if we're using a drill for something else in the spring, say for soybeans, we want to make sure we take the time to change that drill over all those settings appropriately to establish a good stand of whatever cover crop we're seeding in the fall post-harvest with that drill. We can also use row crop planters, which we have a lot of in the Midwest. So row crop planters can be converted to plant numerous species of cover crops. Some planters are just set up to do that. And some we might need some aftermarket seed plates or changes to make them able to plant cover crops. But 30-inch or 15-inch spacing planters can do pretty well at establishing a stand of cover crops, especially cereal rye post-harvest. And most farmers in the Midwest are already going to have a row crop planter. So we're not always having to buy an additional piece of equipment, maybe just some add-ons to that to be able to plant cover crops. And with precision guidance and row spacing, we can maybe offset where we plant those cover crops and then where we plant our cash crop that next spring by just shifting over half a pass when we come back that next spring and plant in between our rows of cover crops with our cash crop planter as our cover crop planter as well. So it leads to some possibilities for management for cash crop and cover crops together there as well. Looking at some of the more specialized cover crop seeders. So most of this equipment are things that would be designed just to plant a cover crop. So we're not going to get any dual uses out of these pieces of equipment, but they do allow for some more specific seeding timings or ways of seeding a cover crop. The first of these is going to be a modified drill interseeder. So like Madeline talked about, seeding in that V3 to V6 time in corn. We probably need to at least modify a grain drill to be able to seed cover crop in that timing by either sliding over or removing some row units, maybe lifting that drill up higher to be able to go into a taller standing crop, and sometimes adding in other things like being able to side dress at the same time while we seed those cover crops at that time period. You see out there a lot. Some guys are getting really creative at building different toolbar mounted seeders. I see quite a few photos of rotary hose being converted to cover crop seeders for interseeding. Side dress bars, all sorts of different things can be converted to seed cover crops. And there's a lot of creative farmers out there being able to come up with different systems to seed cover crops on toolbars. One way to have a little better broadcast stand at that late interseeding before harvest is with high clearance applicators. So a sprayer rig converted to be able to spread cover crops underneath the canopy can sometimes have a little better stand than aerially seeded above the canopy. We're not having that cover crop caught in any of that plant material, and we can get it down in between the rows where we want that cover crop to be. So some sprayers are being converted to seed cover crops in that late period. Like Madeline mentioned, one specific timing we can get cover crops on and save a pass through the field is with harvest. So mounting that seeder onto the combine helps save that pass. We might slow down harvest just a little bit by having to fill that cover crop seeder as well. But we're seeing some bigger and bigger tanks being able to add to these combines where we can maybe go half a day to a full day of not having to refill that combine as well. And then if these are set up correctly, we can get the cover crop seed underneath that cash crop residue. So we are directly on the soil surface, which is a little better than broadcasting on top of that trash after harvest, and trapping some of that moisture in there between the soil and that cash crop residue can help with germination as well. Another pass we see in the fall quite a bit in the Midwest is manure application. So there's some groups playing around with adding cover crop seeders to those manure slurry tanks. So when we have that fall seeding window, we're doing one pass out there and we're applying that cover crop with the manure. With this, we probably want to make sure that that cover crop's getting at, again, the depth it needs to be for that species and not deep in with the manure. And then increasingly popular are drone seeders. The payload on drones keeps getting bigger. They seem to be at a pretty reasonable price point for some of the drones for smaller operations. And we can get out there and do a broadcast application above standing crop, late interseeding with drones and not having to wait on an airplane applicator. A lot of people also like to seed cover crop mixtures, and there's some considerations we should have when planting a cover crop mix as well. So the more species we add into our cover crop mix, the more considerations we have to have about how we're going to plant that mix. So since every species is different, we're probably going to have different seeding depth for every species we add into that mix and a different seeding window. So we want to make sure we're planting in that now probably restricted window of what meets each species requirements. And we want to make sure the method and timing we've chosen to seed that works for all those species. So if we're seeding with a drill, a cover crop mix, and some need to be planted 1/2 inch and some less than 1/4, we might want to consider a drill that has 2 separate boxes so we can get those seeds at 2 different depths and split those species out in the appropriate boxes on that cover crop drill. Especially if we have a large range of seed sizes, things like broadcast seeding, when we put that mix into the hopper on our seeding equipment and we go across a rough field, some of those seed sizes will separate out as we bounce across the field. So a good thing to consider there might be only filling 1/3 to 1/2 full, doing less of the field per fill so we don't have that settle out and have patches of the field that have different proportions of our mix out there. So it's good to check as you're going along how that's settling out and how your spread pattern on depths look with cover crop mixes as well. And those different seed sizes are going to come out of our equipment different, especially on broadcast seeders that are flinging seed. Seed sizes and weights will vary how far that seed is thrown. So when you have a new cover crop mix in your equipment, make sure you're checking that spread pattern to make sure that's even, not only across the width you want, but also that the cover crop mix is spread proportionally even across that spread pattern.
Then I just want to add for the mixture considerations, you're talking a lot about how important it is for spread pattern. Is it important to have the even spread pattern with these different seeds? And just something I want to plant a seed of if that swath isn't even, if that spread pattern isn't even with these really high diversity mixes, it can make planting your cash crop next year very challenging, right? If you've got sunflower, like a line of sunflowers down the middle, and then maybe some other species on the sides, and you're planting into all these different kind of this all this different residue, it can make planting and getting a good, especially getting corn in, can be really difficult. So that spread pattern is important. Um, and then also, we've talked a lot about seeding depth and how it varies across species. You might be thinking, how do I know how deep these different species need to go? Ethan, do you know where you can find that?
Uh, in the cover crop field guide. Oh,
Oh,
it
look, you got
it blended into my background.
it doesn't show up.
Yeah, in the Midwest Cover Crops Field Guide or on the Cover Crop Selector tool, both have information on seeding depth for each species.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody's painstakingly dug through all kinds of resources to find that information. Okay. Our final topic, I think, is going to be just highlighting the calculations that you need to make sure that your seeding rate is actually accurate. Because seeding rate recommendations are in pure live seed or oftentimes shortened to PLS. So, um, what does that mean? How do we get from pure live seed seeding rates to an actual bulk seeding rate? Um, this is important because a lot of times cost share programs are requiring a minimum pure live seed seeding rate. So just highlight that quickly. You can go to the next slide. So pure live seed is going to come from your seed tag, from information on your seed tag. Seed tags are regulated, and so there's specific information that needs to be on them. One being your pure seed, and the other being germination. Those are two numbers that should always be there. To go from purity and germination, you're going to pure live seed, you're going to multiply. So in this case, this crimson clover, we've got 98 or 99% pure seed. And that's going to mean basically what's actually in the bag, that seed, versus in this case, we've got like over 1% inert matter, and then there's a little bit of crop seed from something else. So they know that the seed company knows that it's 98 or 99% pure seed. That's the purity. And then they also have to do testing, germination testing, how much of that seed is actually going to germinate. Um, in this case, we're at 82% germination with this seed batch. So we're going to multiply those two numbers together. You can go to the next slide, Ethan. Thank you. So we had 98% purity, 82% germination. We got 80% pure live seed. Next. So we want to take that pure live seed percent um, and our seeding rate recommendation, which this here is a screenshot of seeding rate recommendations. This is from the seeding guide. So these are in pure live seed. So in this case, the recommendation is 15 to 20 pounds per acre of pure live seed. We're going to take that seeding rate and divide it by our pure live seed percentage to get our bulk seeding rate, which is what we're actually going to be setting the drill at, or, that's what we're going to be broadcasting. You can go to the next slide. So we already figured out our pure live seed percentage. We pulled, let's say I want 10 pounds pure live seed for my clover. I'm going to divide my pure live seed by that 80%, or in this case, 0.8. I'm going to divide 10 pounds by 0.8 to get my bulk seeding rate, which is 12.5 pounds. Anna points out in the comments a very important tip is that, yeah, the difference between 10 and 12.5 pounds is not that much. But in some cases, we've got coated seed. A lot of times clover will come coated, vetch will come coated. That's going to mean that our actual pure live seed percentage is going to be much different, which means the difference between that pure live seeding rate and the bulk seeding rate could be much bigger and have a much bigger impact. Um, so the seed coating would mean that our purity percentage would be much lower, that inert matter would be much higher. And so this can be really important to do this calculation, right? 10 pounds versus 12 pounds, not that different. But in the case of we've got much lower purity, um, it can create a bigger difference. And can you click next, Ethan? I'm not a huge fan of doing math. It's not, that's not I don't love it. Not my go-to. And so these calculations can seem tricky. The thing that I like to remember is that there's always you're always going to have a larger bulk seeding rate than your pure live seeding rate. So in the case that for some reason you go through these calculations and your bulk seeding rate happens to be lower than your pure live seeding rate, then you've done something wrong. That's a trigger that you got to go back and do it again. So I like to remember that bulk seeding rate is always going to be larger. And if it isn't, go back and try again. Good. Ethan's like, I got this. I love math.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's important.
so
Oh, sorry.
no,
Uh,
that's good.
for pure live seed, for growers growing their own seed, it's also good to send in your seed and have that tested so you can calculate PLS of homegrown seed as well. There's seed lab.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more of that of growing your own seed, making sure you actually know what that germination rate is, what that purity is important. Okay, so that's everything that is in the planting um, website right now. Those are all of the topics that we've highlighted. All of that information, comes from, again, research that's been done in the region, or from farmer input or farmer trials. A lot of that information comes from these additional planting resources that we highlight, that we have the actual documents in there, whether they're bulletins from various extension programs, or they're articles, or just, fact sheets. It's all in there, hopefully easy to find right there at the bottom.